everybody. This is Ed Lynch. Welcome to Surfing Baseball. My special guest today is renowned national baseball writer, syndicated writer, and author Bob Nightengale. Bob, how you doing today?
Yeah, doing great. Good to see you, Ed.
We're going to talk about one of the hottest topics now in baseball, and that's the rash of arm injuries for pitchers and some of the causes, some of the effects. And we're going to go as deep as we can into this because it's not as simple as people may think. And, I pitched a long time, and Bob he's in tune with what's going on the field with the players today. So, Bob, I read your article the other day, and it was very, very enlightening and right on point. So why don't you summarize what you wrote the other day in terms of what your beliefs are, what you're hearing down on the field about these injuries?
Well, there's been so many, pitching injuries, particularly Tommy John, to some of the game's greatest pitchers. I mean, you mentioned the NFL, Ed. If we saw the top quarterbacks all go down, the Patrick Mahomes of the world, those guys. Same thing happening in baseball, where those are our biggest stars. You're excited the days they pitch, and and they're dropping a lot. They're not just dropping for a couple of weeks. They're dropping out for a year, 16 months with these Tommy John surgeries. So there's, so many reasons. One, I think it's these kids are, throwing as hard as they can when they're in high school, trying to get noticed by colleges and, and pros. Whether it's Driveline or these programs, all they worry about is the velocity. And all they can do is throw as hard as they can. Look at Noah Syndergaard, great young Mets starter. Kept blowing as hard as he could, kept getting hurt. Now the guy's out of baseball at a young age. I don't even think he's 30. So that sort of thing. The baseballs, they don't have the seams as high as they do. You're not allowed to use the sticky stuff anymore. So guys are, gripping that ball harder. I don't know why baseball can't come up with just a regular baseball with a tackiness on it, just like you do in Japan. But I think, these guys aren't groomed right either. I mean, everybody's just groomed to throw, 4 or 5 innings and turn over the bullpen. I think the, Hall of Fame John Smoltz, I got to look this up, it's right. But I remember, a couple of years ago, he says, what's the most unbreakable record in baseball? I threw out the usual. He said, no, Greg Maddux, 27 complete games in the minor leagues. It'll never happen again. As we talked about the other day, Ed, here's the young pitcher from the Pittsburgh Pirates. Throws 59 pitches, he's out of the game.
Yeah, it really is incredible. I think curtailing use has not changed the rate of injuries. The rate of injuries are still rising. So the answer is not throwing less. I think the answer is, like you said, throwing with less effort. And, I think we need to go take a step back and look at why this is being taught. I think when you have guys that have never held a baseball before and they're teaching or having certain conclusions on way pitchers should pitch, there's a reason for that. And I break it down to the B's, the ball, the ballparks, and the bats, things that people don't talk about. And, when I was coming through the system, I just got off the phone with Ron Darley, and we talked about, when we came up, you were taught two things: work fast and pitch to contact. Work fast helped because the players play much better defense behind you, and pitch to contact because you didn't want to get into too many deep counts because you were rewarded in those days on how many outs you got and how deep you went into games and how many innings you pitched as a starter. And now that's not true anymore. So I think with the way bats are, they're hard as a rock. I talked to David Segui this morning, and he's been in that bat industry for years. And, Mark Grace told me last night, the whole ball game changed back when they started using Canadian maple. They used ash bats, and those ash bats were very soft. And you had to hit a ball right on the screws to get it out of the park. And now the bats are so hard. They're, not only is the wood hard, but they're controlling the moisture content. They're controlling the splitting of the wood. They're boning the bats very hard. The moisture content in the bats are dry and hard. The preservation of the wood, all those factors, it's very scientific now. So you've got a ball that's very hard, very lively. You've got bats that are extremely hard and lively. And the ballparks, every ballpark that's being built is replacing is smaller than the park it replaced. So I can understand why there's this movement of throwing away from contact at all costs. And then if you're going to pitch away from contact, your first reaction is, well, I'm going to throw more breaking balls. And I think the feeling is there are more breaking balls being thrown than in the past. Is that correct, Bob?
Yeah, they rely on that, a lot more. You can't, you cannot throw 100 miles an hour. Throw in the, the sliders, the sweepers, everything that you want, the cut fastball. But yeah, it's just and let's be honest, Major League Baseball wants more offense. I mean, the game took off during the steroid era. All kinds of runs are being scored. They hate these 2-1 games, even though they're great. And to your point, Ed, I think a lot of these guys are trying to just worry about the strikeout and not pitch the contact because they don't trust the guys behind them. A lot of these kids are getting promoted from the minor leagues so quickly, they're not ready. So they'll bring them up because they got a good bat, even though they're not ready defensively.
Yeah, and I think John Smoltz kind of summed it up. If your goal is strikeouts and low ERA, and now low ERA I can understand, but when there's this obsession with ERA, if you're up 10-0, there were many times I pitched 6 complete games in a single year in the major leagues. I would have led the league several times. I would have had more. 6 complete games would have beat most organizations in the big leagues in complete games in the last 10 years. But when your sole focus is strikeouts and never giving up a run. So, I mean, there were times when I would go out there and we'd be winning 8-1 after the 6th inning, and I would come in and Davey Johnson would say, hey, can you finish it? I said, yeah, absolutely. And I would win the game 10-4, and the emphasis was on winning. The wins were gold. The win was the most valuable thing. If you asked a pitcher back then, would you rather go 7 innings shutout with 1 unearned run and get the loss, or would you rather go 7 innings and give up 4 earned runs and get the win? Back then, we'd always take that win over the earned runs. But I think now a lot of guys would say, I'd rather have the loss, but the no earned runs on 7 shutout innings on. And I think that's the focus too. There's such focus on the individual stats in the game, including spin rate, velocity, for hitters, OPS plus, all those things take a back seat. They should take a back seat to winning the game. And I think that has affected the way pitchers pitch also.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago, or the year that Greg Mask got inducted. So the day before, they have like a little round table. People went to his table asking questions. And some guy asked Greg, you also believe that, like in today's game, that wins are overrated stat? Greg's got his reading glasses on like this. He lowers them and goes, you got to be kidding me, right? Wins mean everything to a starting pitcher. Don't give me that. And yeah, that part is lost. Where we're you hear about it on the TV, newspaper reports. They're not talking about a win for a pitcher. You got to outpitch the other guy. When the guy's going, 8-18, there's a reason for that. A lot of guys feel comfortable pitching when you're losing. If you've got to protect that lead, they're not the same pitcher.
No, I agree. And, the innings pitched. I mean, I see players getting rewarded with $100 million contracts, and they've never pitched more than 120 or 130 innings in a year. And, I don't want to pick on the player. I don't blame the players whatsoever. John Smoltz had a great point. It's the reward system, what you're rewarded for. So the players, obviously, they're going to go towards that reward system, whether you're an 18-year-old high school senior or you're a 28-year-old major league starting pitcher. You are being rewarded for velocity, spin rate, and all those incremental qualitative starts rather than the quantitative starts of innings pitched starts. Now look at Blake Snell. I don't want to pick on him, but here's a guy that's won two Cy Young awards and has never thrown a pitch in the major leagues in the 8th inning. That's beyond comprehension. Obviously, he's never had a complete game and has 2 Cy Young awards, but has never thrown a pitch in the 8th inning. I mean, that's hard to comprehend.
It really is. It's like, Ranger Suarez threw the complete game the other night for the Phillies. And remember, everybody was laughing. Hey, is that legal to go in the ninth inning? He threw 112 pitches. Good for him. I mean, it should be a great, great honor to pitch a shutout or, even a complete game. But that's not being emphasized enough. Remember when you pitched, Ed, it was always, if someone went, 5 innings and out, you'd be kind of ridiculed. Hey, if I've been fly,
Five and fly. That's right. Yeah,
and
5 and
people,
fly.
high-fiving each other. Hey, 5 innings, good for you.
That's right. But I really don't think that this approach to pitching is going to change until a lot of issues are addressed. The things I talked about, the bats are hard as a rock. The balls are like golf balls. The joke is the guys in Major League Baseball, a lot of the pitchers call the baseball the Pro V1, which is the most popular ball on the PGA Tour. So they feel like it's a golf ball also. So the bats, the ball, the ballparks, I mean, it's really ridiculous. And I don't want to sound like Abe Lincoln here, but, when I pitched, if you're pitching in the Astrodome or in St. Louis or in Shea Stadium, if that ball went directly over your head, unless they had a blue flame coming out of the back of it, someone's going to catch that ball. And I remember talking to Ted Simmons back in the, when he was at the Cardinals, Hall of Famer in the 70s. He said at Old Busch Stadium, you didn't even try to hit a ball between the gaps to the center of the field in the air because it's going to be an out. Someone out there is going to catch the ball. So if you felt like you got a pitch that you could pull, maybe you would try to get your swing to the point where you could, get a little bit of lift on the ball and pull the ball down the lines. But now you have guys mishitting ball. We saw Ketel Marte the other night bend over on the outside part of the plate. And, he's a strong guy, but really just threw the head out there and hit a line drive to right center field. And the ball went out of the ballpark. You and I were speechless. And, you tell everybody what the right fielder said, after the game.
Cody Bellinger, the center, he thought it was going to be a double off the wall. Craig Counsell thought it was going to bounce off the warning track. He goes, okay, man on second base, Corbin Carroll's up. We got some trouble here. Nobody thought that ball was going out. And, but they build the ballparks, smaller too. Cincinnati, those places are Pittsburgh are a joke. Just be the old, remember the old Tiger Stadium? They kind of built it for pitchers. I love what Baltimore did last year. So, their GM Michaelias came in and said, you know what? We want to move the fences back. They moved the fences back last year. Guess what? They won 101 games. They're kind of emphasizing that pitching in their defense. They don't want a bandbox. It's tough to win games in a bandbox.
It is. And when you're in a bandbox like that, it tends to de-emphasize defense too, because, the outfield's a smaller area. You don't have to be as mobile. You don't have to throw as well because you're playing closer to the plate. And there's a little irony here that, that Whitey Herzog passed away. And I watched pretty much a lot of biographies on him last night. And, they were saying, well, he didn't want power on his team. And that's not true. But he had to emphasize his ballpark and what it meant to him. And, those Cardinal teams of the mid-'80s, all those guys could run. They could play defense. They played the whole field. They didn't try to pull the ball. They had the AstroTurf. I mean, it was like a pinball machine in there with those guys. But he always had that big guy in the middle of the lineup, the Jack Clarks of the world, that when you're facing all lefties or switch hitters as a right-handed pitcher, here comes Jack Clark, and invariably you're going to hang a slider. And so then he hits a 3-run homer. Now the game's really over. But that was to the other extreme. Now it's, even the little guys, the leadoff men, are trying to hit home runs. Or when a little guy fillets a ball at Yankee Stadium and drops it in the first row in right field, I mean, that's demoralizing to a pitcher. So, I mean, I'm smart enough to understand. I mean, I ran ball clubs. I was a general manager of a franchise. I understand that you just can't go out tomorrow and tell the pitchers, hey, pitch like it's the 80s. Go in there, throw fastballs down the middle, low and away, until you have to throw something else. And because the ball is so juiced, the bats are so hard, the players are stronger. And, the big taboo here, we've got to talk about, Bob. And if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But, the PED use is still prevalent in our game. I mean, I talked to a couple of ex-players. They didn't want me to use their name, but they call it, microdosing now. There's certain levels of testosterone in your sample, in your urine, or whatever fluid they take, that if you're careful and you do things right, it's virtually impossible to get caught. And I'm not going to name any names, but I've been down in that clubhouse and I've seen guys with their shirts off. I mean, these guys are buffed. You got some very big, strong people. Do you agree with that assessment?
Oh, I do. It's almost impossible to get caught these days. Victor Conte, the mastermind of Balco, is convinced of it. I remember talking to him a few years ago. He thinks 50% of the guys are doing stuff. You take these lozenges, these patches, and you're fine. I mean, remember the Biogenics clinic in Miami? 15 guys got nailed, including A-Rod and Ryan Braun. Those guys passed every single drug test. They only got caught because it was a paper trail. And that's what's happening. It's almost impossible to get caught. Guys are being, smart about how they do it. And I mean, when you're having 7, 8, 9 guys are going opposite field, you're kind of shaking your head like, wait a minute now, what is happening here? And that probably goes, into what you're saying just about everybody looking for that strikeout, and they're afraid if that ball gets into the air, it's gone.
That's right. And I remember Victor Conti saying, you basically have to be an idiot if you get caught. And I remember when I was with Toronto, we had a player get caught. I'm not going to mention his name, but evidently he went out after a game and, had several drinks or whatever and forgot he had his patch on his arm and went to bed and got up the next day and went, oh shit, took it off, went to the ballpark, boom, got tested, done for 80 days. So, I mean, you almost have to be either extremely negligent or stupid to get caught now. I mean, that's how good it is. And look at the stakes. I mean, how much money you think is being spent on these procedures to enhance your performance versus how many resources are being devoted or the restrictions under the basic agreement where there's no way the testing can keep up with the technology of the taking, so to speak. So, add that to the list. So it's, I learned a long time ago, Bob, that if there's any major trend in any sport or any walk of life, why are there more drug deaths now? Well, it's not as simple as, there's more fentanyl. It goes down to like probably 20 reasons. So in baseball, why are injuries happening? It's probably 18 reasons rather than one. And I think all the reasons we touched on are important. I think the last thing I'll talk about is, kids, they don't throw as much as we did. Again, I don't want to sound like Abe Lincoln had to walk 5 miles through the snow to get to my game and all that crap. Nobody wants to hear that. But there's no doubt that kids don't throw as much. They probably pitch too much and they don't throw enough. And, you go to a Little League game and you have kids throwing breaking balls because that coach wants to win a $5 trophy. I mean, it's ludicrous. And now that the number of, and I'll ask you, I think I've seen this, the age of Tommy John patients is going down all the time. It used to be the only people that got Tommy John was maybe a 23-year-old minor leaguer or big leaguer for his first Tommy John. Now they're going down to high school level. Have you been hearing that, Bob?
Oh, absolutely. I've talked to doctors. They'll have high school kids go in, with their parents saying, can you give my son Tommy John surgery? They say, why? He doesn't really need it. He goes, oh, strengthen his elbow. We want him to throw harder when he has a surgery because it's such a great success rate for the first time. 95% drops out to about 50% the second time. But yeah, so even if you don't need it, some of these high school kids are saying, you know what, let me have Tommy John surgery so I can throw harder. It's amazing. And talk to guys too, like I remember talking to CC Sabathia a few years ago. His son was like in 7th or 8th grade. And the coaches are saying, hey, just stick to baseball. And CC said, no. Hey, when it's football season, he's playing football. Wintertime, he's playing basketball. So these kids are throwing, all year long and stuff, and they're so young. And they're almost, put all these stress and innings in their arm before they even turn pro. Then they turn pro, then boom, it blows out. So, it's not just a, Major League Baseball, professional baseball. it's happening, way before these guys even get their hands on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard that myth that your arm is better after Tommy John. And I'll tell you why, in my opinion, based on years of experience and personal experience. When those kids have that Tommy John surgery for the first time in their life, now they're going through a rehab where they're building not only the injured area, but all the other ancillary muscles that are used in throwing a baseball. So for the first time in their life, they're doing the exercises that they should to make their elbows stronger. So, I had a theory is, if you have a young high school pitcher who gets drafted and then he goes into, pitches a little bit in pro ball, he comes home, you almost want to go up to him and say, hey, let's pretend you just had Tommy John surgery, okay, last week. All right. So let's go through the rehab. We'll call it prehab. We'll pretend that you've had Tommy John where you haven't. So you're going to do all those exercises to make all the other muscles strong. That's the reason why kids feel so much better after that first Tommy John. I mean, to suggest by anybody that you don't need Tommy John, let's get it because it'll make you better is probably criminal. I mean, it's so ridiculous. So again, there's another outcome of this. The players are getting younger and younger. And I went down the list. It showed, I saw an article in Sports Illustrated where it had all the hardest throwing guys and fastballs, starting pitchers, starting with DeGrom and going through all these guys. And it's amazing how many second Tommy John, third Tommy Johns are in there, And the one thing that people don't talk about is that, okay, this velocity causes these arm injuries, but one thing about all these pitchers, take Jacob DeGrom. Sure, he throws 99 miles an hour, but he's also got a 92-mile-an-hour slider. So in a lot of ways, that spin rate, again, is probably more dangerous than velocity, and we keep pounding that spin rate, twist the arm. And it's a very, throwing a ball above your head is a very unnatural movement. When God created man, he did not have that in mind, and he certainly didn't have in mind torquing your arm to that extent. So I don't know if we've accomplished anything, but I think we identified, and thank you so much for your help in identifying some of the issues that I think Major League Baseball needs to address. They cannot keep going down this road. Like you said, if there's something something that's happening on the field where you lose Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Josh Allen, all in the same 3 or 4 week period, you're going to put an end to that as quickly as you can because that's the heart and soul of your game. So I thought that was a great point also. So Bob,
and like John Smoltz pointed out years ago, he still harps on it. He says, if you go to a dealership, buy a brand new Porsche or Maserati, you're not revving that thing up to 130 miles an hour in the third gear, redlining it the whole time and thinking the engine's going to, hold up. It's going to blow out. And that's the same thing with these pitchers. They're redlining it the whole time. Hey, your arm's going to blow. That's
right. As a starting pitcher, it's more of a marathon than it is as a sprint. Not only in a single game, but in the course of a season, the guys that are throwing 200 innings are becoming less and less and less because they're pitching every game as a sprint. Not only individual games, but start to start. Everything is 100 miles an hour. There's no way you're going to get to mile 25 or 26 if you're a marathon runner, if you're sprinting out of the gate in the first mile. So, there's a place for quantity rather than quality. And starting pitching is certainly something like, I think we talked the other night, when somebody had a complete game shutout and you said jokingly, somebody said, hey, is that legal? Are they getting in trouble for that? But just think about those guys in the bullpen. And I've been there. When Dwight Gooden would go out when I was with the Mets, that bullpen, those guys were smiling. Half of them didn't even have their spikes on. They knew they had the night off. And you get a night off without pitching in the game. And another thing is dry hump. A dry hump, for people who don't know, is when you get warm up in a game and you don't get in the game. That's called a dry hump. It's kind of not the nicest way to put it, but that's what it is. So when you go to the ballpark, when you've been pitching every day, and you don't get in the game, and you don't have a dry hump, boy, I'll tell you, that does wonders for your mind and for your arm. So that starting pitcher has more than a job of pitching 9 innings. He also has to help that bullpen, give them a night off. The way these bullpens are being used, these managers are managing games in April like it's the 5th game of the NL or ALCS. You know, it's right, left in the 8th inning of a 7-1 game. So, you know, when you get to August and you're managing the way guys are managing now in April, we're in April and we have all these injuries. What's it going to look like in August, you know?
Yeah, you're right. I remember, to your point about saving the bullpen, I remember when Justin Verlander was up for the MVP that year. Not only Cy Young, he was going to win that, but MVP. She'd be MVP. And Gene Leland says, you know what? He affects 3 games when he pitches. The night before, I can blow out that bullpen. The game of Verlander pitches, he's going to go 8 or 9. And now the bullpen's rested for the day after. So it affects 3 games every time it goes out there. And that's the when guys go deep, that's the beauty of them.
That's exactly right. That's a great way to put it. And that's why those number 1 starters are so valuable. And people say, well, geez, they only pitch 1 game. But as you said, not only do they affect the game before them, their game, and the game after, they show all the other starters what's possible and what they too can accomplish. So, well, I hope Major League Baseball addresses some of the issues we talked about, the bats, the balls, the PED use, which is a very difficult one because you have the union there. And I was a union rep, and I'm not saying anything out of school here. Their job is to protect the players, and they're going to do everything they can to protect the players. And so it's a very uneasy relationship right now between Major League Baseball and the union. Tony Clark came out already and said that the pitch clock is causing some of these injuries, which I respect Tony. I don't know if there's enough information out there to make that determination, but there's a lot of things that the Major League Baseball can do, but there's a lot of things they can't do. But I just hope they address some of the things they can do.
Yeah, make it a much better game. And there's nothing better than getting excited about going to the ballpark. You're going to see a great pitching matchup. You don't want to go to the ballpark and say, okay, who's opening today? Is he going 1 inning, 2 innings?
Yeah, that's right. Who's opening? So anyway, thanks so much, Bob. I hope we solved the world's problems. I don't think we did, but at least we identified them. And again, thanks very much, and I'll be seeing you down the road.
Always my pleasure. Thanks, Ed.
Okay, thank you, Bob.